You were only 4 years old when this happened. What do you remember about the morning you found your mom?
I remember looking through the keyhole from my bedroom, and I saw something laying on the floor. My mommy was dead.
Heidi tells me my mom was murdered. She was stabbed 19 times. I told her I would look into it.
I told him everything that I could possibly tell about my mom's case. I told him every rumor, every story.
Once I determined that there was no evidence, no case file, it kind of sunk me. She gave me a picture of her as a 4-year-old standing in front of her mom's outline.
I had no idea how valuable the photos were.
What was your reaction?
It was like time froze because I had chills all up and down my body. It was like, holy cow.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn. Tonight, we're on the case in Price, Utah, 2 hours south of Salt Lake City. It was here in the safe and close-knit small town that 23-year-old Loretta Jones was found stabbed to death inside her home. The savage murder stunned the community and devastated Loretta's only child, Heidi. At the tender age of 4, it was Heidi who discovered the grisly crime scene. As she grew up, her family tried to keep the details of the unsolved case a secret. But 39 years later, Heidi decided that the only way to put the tragedy behind her was to help put her mother's killer behind bars. August 17th, 2009. Nearly 4 decades had passed since a then 4-year-old Heidi Jones discovered the lifeless body of her mother Loretta on the floor of their living room. Throughout her life, Heidi's family had never spoken with her about that tragic morning, nor the investigation that had failed to bring her mother's killer to justice. As the years passed, how frustrated did you become by the fact that no arrests had been made?
I lived with my mom's murder the way it was. That's just the way it was going to be.
After school, Heidi moved to California and got a job. But the unanswered questions and gruesome memories continued to keep her up at night. Heidi said, as her 40th birthday approached, she decided there was only one way to put her lifelong nightmare to rest.
I told my friends, I'm going to go back to Utah and solve my mom's murder case.
The first step in Heidi's plan was setting up a meeting with her high school friend David Brewer, who was now a detective at the Carbon County Sheriff's Department.
What did you say to him?
Oh, I spilled my guts to him. I just needed help.
Heidi's painful story began on July 31st, 1970. That morning, the 4-year-old girl woke up frightened, although she can't remember why.
I remember looking through the keyhole from my bedroom, and I saw something laying on the floor. And it didn't dawn on me at first that it was my mom. Then when I opened the door, there was blood everywhere.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you to walk into. Did you understand your mom was gone?
Yes.
Terrified and confused, Heidi ran outside to look for help.
My next-door neighbor was outside, and I'm in my nightgown, and I told him my mommy was dead.
Sergeant Brewer listened in stunned silence. He had never heard anything about the murder of Loretta Jones before that morning, and Heidi's account was chilling.
So when Heidi started giving you the details of her mother's murder, what was going through your mind?
Heidi tells me my mom was murdered. She was stabbed 19 times and her throat was cut and she was raped. Just for a child to see something like that with their own mother laying there, just is unimaginable. My heart hurt for Heidi, even though it was a long time ago.
Heidi told Detective Brewer that the rest of the day remains a blur. Her grandparents and police arrived moments later and confirmed what she already knew. Her mother, Loretta Jones, had been murdered. After her mother's death, the 4-year-old went to live with her grandparents.
What was it like being raised by your grandparents?
All my aunts and uncles became my brothers and sisters. And for the most part, I was just one of their kids. My grandma would say, "Oh, this is my youngest." And they would say, "Oh, she's the granddaughter whose mother was murdered."
That must have hurt.
Small town. Small town.
Heidi believed the case had been swept under the rug in 1970, in part because Loretta was a single mother. Back then, Price had been a conservative community where a woman raising a child alone was frowned upon.
She was an unwed mother, and that just wasn't acceptable then. She wanted to raise her little girl. She was a very caring mother, very loving.
While her grandparents never shared much about the brutal crime or the investigation, over the years, Heidi had done her best to gather whatever information she could find, and she shared it with Sergeant Brewer.
I told him everything that I could possibly tell about my mom's case. I told him every rumor, every story. I told him everything that I had ever heard about my mom.
What struck you as Heidi told you her story and the story of her mother's murder?
Her passion behind it, and, of course, she broke down in tears as if it happened just yesterday.
Heidi made it clear that nothing would stop her from getting answers.
I was going to do whatever I had to do. I remember her being amazing. She was beautiful. She loved to dance. She loved to listen to music. My mom's life mattered.
At the end of his meeting with Heidi, Sergeant Brewer was committed to solving the case, but that task would be extremely daunting.
Had you ever investigated a homicide before?
Never. This is my first.
And the investigation would be unlike any Sergeant Brewer had ever been involved with.
What was the first step you took after Heidi left your office?
The first step was to look for the original case file and box of evidence.
But Sergeant Brewer was crushed when he discovered that all the records from the case had been destroyed in a flood.
So here you are, really moved by a young woman who's coming to you saying, you need to reopen this case, you need to solve it, and there's no case file. How do you even begin the process of the investigation?
It was kind of a shocker.
Suddenly, it appeared his investigation might be over before it had even begun. Sergeant David Brewer of the Carbon County Sheriff's Department promised Heidi Jones that he would reopen the investigation into her mother's murder. But Brewer had no idea just how many obstacles he would face. All of the evidence and police reports from the 39-year-old cold case had been destroyed. In fact, the only leads he discovered came from some old newspaper clippings. Sergeant David Brewer was willing to do whatever it took to bring Loretta Jones' killer to justice. But he had no physical evidence, no crime scene photos, and no police records to go over. A newspaper article Brewer pored over stated that the original investigative team had actually arrested a suspect back in 1970, but the case had been dropped.
I had to assume that they had the wrong guy because they showed a preliminary hearing which he was set free on. So all I could do is start over.
So where did you think the investigation would go from there?
Once I determined that there was no evidence, no case file, it kind of sunk me. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere from there.
But Sergeant Brewer wouldn't give up until he had exhausted every avenue. He obtained the only official document that remained from the case, the autopsy report the medical examiner had done. But it only confirmed what he already suspected.
Did the ME's report establish that Loretta had been sexually assaulted?
It did. And they actually produced a vaginal swab, which had semen present on it, but that's some of the evidence that was lost. That would be a gold mine today.
Next, Sergeant Brewer focused on tracking down the original investigators. He hoped they could provide some of the critical details he was missing.
Could you find any of them?
I soon found out that they were all deceased.
But Brewer did manage to locate a deputy who had been at the crime scene.
When you met up with him, what did he tell you?
He told me that he was first on scene. He described Loretta in a pool of blood.
Beyond his description of the gruesome scene, the deputy seemed to have little information he could add.
All he did was peek in, saw what he assumed was a deceased body, and just roped off the area.
Brewer shared the disappointing news with Heidi and tried to explain that he had no leads to follow. Then, Heidi remembered an odd photograph that her grandmother had taken of her the day police released the crime scene back to her family.
She gave me a picture of her as a 4-year-old standing in front of her mom's outline with the blood there.
The snapshot was disturbing, but was as close to a crime scene photograph as Brewer was going to get.
What did you learn from that picture?
I pieced together some of the events. I noticed pools of blood where they shouldn't have been based on where she was lying.
Based on the location of the blood, Brewer theorized that a portion of the violent sexual attack had taken place on the sofa.
There was a pool of blood on the couch cushions.
Loretta was then forced onto the floor, where she was found the next morning. Brewer visited the actual crime scene decades later, hoping he could enhance his understanding of the photograph.
Loretta was found right here. She would have had her head probably about right here, and the rest of her body kind of angled this way with her hand over here, and this pool of blood was kind of right here. And then you also had a pool of blood right here on the couch.
Brewer still didn't have a single lead to follow when he came up with an idea that might move the investigation forward. He decided to put an ad in the local newspaper, asking anyone who remembered anything about the case to call in. Brewer was stunned when the chief of the Price City Police Department contacted him. It turned out that over the years, the local law enforcement agency had looked into Loretta's murder. And the report they had compiled contained interviews with several of the original investigators. Detectives had found no sign of forced entry at Loretta's home and concluded that the young mother knew her killer. But perhaps the most important piece of information Brewer learned was that on the night of Loretta's murder, there had been an attempted abduction of a 10-year-old girl just a few blocks away, and police were certain the two crimes were connected.
She was riding her bicycle. Someone grabbed her from behind.
The young girl had managed to escape, and now Sergeant Brewer wondered if a detail she might remember nearly 40 years later would help him solve the murder of Loretta Jones. Carbon County Sheriff Sergeant David Brewer was trying to do the impossible: solve a 39-year-old homicide case without any physical evidence nor the original police file. Nearly all of the information the detective had on the murder of Loretta Jones had come from newspaper articles or from the memory of her daughter Heidi, who was just 4 years old at the time of the crime. But now, for the first time since Sergeant Brewer started his investigation, he had a promising lead to follow. It would come from the victim of an attempted abduction that had taken place in Loretta's neighborhood on the same night as her murder. On July 30th, 1970, Lori Kula was a typical 10-year-old girl having fun riding her bike on a warm summer night. Then she realized it was dark and she was outside by herself.
I noticed that my brother and his friend had gone in. So I dropped my bike to go in the house.
But Lori wasn't alone.
I noticed this guy coming up behind me.
Just before Lori reached the safety of her home, the man attacked her.
Did he grab you from behind?
He did. He grabbed me from behind. He had my hands behind my back, and then he put a hand over my mouth so I couldn't scream. I was trying to get away, and I was scared because I couldn't breathe very well.
As Lori desperately tried to escape, the man's hand slipped off her mouth for just a second.
And I was able to let out a loud scream.
Lori's shriek panicked her attacker, and he took off. Lori's 12-year-old brother, Jim, and his friend Danny came outside to see what had happened.
We hear a blood-curdling scream, and it's my sister, and she's hysterical. She's saying, that man, he grabbed me.
Jim and Danny chased after Lori's attacker, but the man was gone. When the Price City police arrived, the frightened young girl did her best to describe the man that had tried to abduct her.
Did you get a look at his face?
Not a really good look, but I did get a look at him, so I knew what he looked like.
When Lori told investigators that the man had been wearing an odd yellow hat, her brother Jim realized that he had actually seen the same stranger eating a hamburger a few minutes before Lori was attacked.
I remember a man sitting under a streetlight. He had a weird hat on. It was bright yellow with flower print on it. And he's looking at us, and we're making eye contact.
Why did you notice him in the first place?
In a small town like that, it was something that stuck out to me.
Jim and Danny had forgotten that Lori was still riding her bike when they went inside. That night, officers searched the area, but were unable to find a suspect who matched the description that Jim and Lori had given them. The next morning, those same police officers were back in the neighborhood. Jim and his friend Danny followed their sirens to a house just up the street.
Danny and I hear the news that a little girl found her mother laying in a pool of blood on the living room floor.
That little girl was Heidi Jones. In 1970, violent crime was all but unheard of in Price. Then, on this same night, there had been an attempted abduction and a murder just hours apart. Nearly 40 years later, Sergeant Brewer could see why police had been convinced the two crimes were connected. And he knew his best lead would be Lori and Jim Kulo's description of the man they had seen that night.
Brown hair, lighter eyes, like 5'10", 5'11", something like that. He wasn't real tall, but he wasn't short.
Lori and Jim told Sergeant Brewer that police had put out an all-points bulletin based on their description.
Was that the point at which the police confirmed that your attempted kidnapping might be connected to a murder down the street?
Yes. Yep.
What were you feeling?
I was overwhelmed. I was afraid, because if that was the same guy, I was the only one that could identify him.
Carbon County Sheriff Sergeant David Brewer finally had a solid lead to follow in the Loretta Jones murder case. In 1970, the original team of investigators had theorized that the homicide and the attempted abduction of a young girl that same night were connected. And as Brewer listened to the victim's chilling story almost 40 years later, he was convinced they were right. Back in 1970, 10-year-old Lori Kulo and her brother Jim hoped that police would find the man who had tried to abduct her. And when detectives released a description of the suspect and his unusual yellow hat to the media, tips came pouring in about a man named Tom Egley.
They knew this guy to be wearing that type of hat.
And the lead looked even more promising when investigators discovered a connection between Egley and Loretta Jones.
Did the tipster believe Loretta actually knew Tom Egley?
He did. He knew of Tom dating Loretta at a certain point in time, but that relationship had long since gone.
Lori and Jim Kulo told Sergeant Brewer that they had been brought to the police station to view Egley in a lineup.
What happened when you got there?
I remember pointing him out and saying, "That's him."
Was there any doubt in your mind when you saw the man?
None at all, no. As soon as I saw him, I pointed at him and said, "That's him, that's this guy I saw." I knew immediately.
Detectives were just as confident that Egley was the man they had been looking for.
He was arrested for the assault on the girl, and there is a booking photo of him for that assault. And then they arrested him for the murder.
But just a few months after the arrest, a judge dismissed all charges against Tom Egley at a preliminary hearing. Neither the Kulos nor the newspaper clippings Brewer had collected could explain why he was set free.
I had to assume that the judicial system was working and they had the wrong guy.
Sergeant Brewer hoped the court transcript from the hearing would spell out the reasons for the judge's decision. But unfortunately, that document no longer existed.
We didn't have any preliminary hearing transcripts.
Once again, Brewer dug deeper. He tracked down the court reporter from that hearing.
I was able to find her. She was still alive. She lived up in Salt Lake.
She said, "I don't think I have anything, but I'll look." Well, luckily, it was the first case she'd ever court reported on, and so she had kept a transcript.
It was just the kind of break Sergeant Brewer needed. The court reporter's transcript was a treasure trove of information. It mapped out the case prosecutors had against Tom Egley back in 1970.
Did Egley admit to knowing Loretta?
He did. He said he had dated her a few times.
Egley told investigators he was in Price on the day Loretta was killed.
He claimed he went to town, got a burger, and then walked back home.
When Sergeant Brewer read that Egley had been eating a burger, he was stunned. It matched up perfectly with the story Jim Kulo had told him about the man who had tried to abduct his sister.
I had chills all up and down my body. It's like, holy cow, that's exactly what Kulo said you were doing.
Despite his own statements that placed him in the area of both crimes, Egley denied having anything to do with either the murder or the attempted kidnapping.
Did he ever admit to the attempted kidnapping?
No, no.
The transcript revealed police had searched Egley's home and even tested the clothing Egley claimed to have worn that night. But they found nothing connecting him to the crime. At the end of the hearing, the judge dismissed the charges against Egley.
Why was Egley set free?
Lack of evidence. After reading the preliminary hearing transcripts, I can see why. There really wasn't a lot.
There's evidence that he was in Price, and that was about it. I mean, there really is nothing else.
But Sergeant Brewer was certain that there had been something that police had missed. As he pored over the transcript, a vague reference caught his attention. Had Loretta Jones left a valuable clue at the crime scene?
I had read about Loretta writing the name of the killer in blood.
Sergeant David Brewer was finally making some progress on the unsolved murder of Loretta Jones. His investigation had uncovered a copy of a preliminary hearing transcript that explained why Tom Egley, the original suspect in the case, had been released without a trial. Although the court had ruled there wasn't enough evidence to move forward, the document provided Brewer with the defendant's timeline, a list of potential witnesses, and an obscure reference to a potentially valuable new clue that Loretta herself had left at the crime scene. The preliminary hearing transcript Sergeant Brewer had managed to get his hands on became the roadmap for his investigation. And perhaps the most damning new clue he found in his pages was the possibility that Loretta might have been trying to identify her killer as she was dying.
They noticed that Loretta's hand was in a pool of blood.
Could Loretta have been trying to write her killer's name in blood?
When investigators looked closely at the pool of blood, what did they see?
The initials T and O in a pool of blood from Loretta's hand.
The testimony about the theory in the transcript was vague, so Sergeant Brewer decided to speak with the only living member of law enforcement who had been at the crime scene, the patrol officer who had been the first to see Loretta's body.
He said, I saw him with my own eyes. He said, I saw a T and an O.
He said there was no mistaking that.
No mistake.
Sergeant Brewer immediately thought of the picture Heidi had given to him at the beginning of his investigation. He had examined the photograph of the crime scene hundreds of times, but the new information allowed him to see something he had missed.
Upon looking at where her hand position was and the T and the O, that's when I determined that that's exactly what it was.
Brewer was now convinced that Loretta had managed to scrawl the first two letters of her killer's name. T.O. for Tom Egley. For Heidi Jones, the new information was stunning.
I never knew about it.
What was your reaction when you were told?
Bingo.
Yet another sign that Tom Egley was the murderer?
Right. Why else would she be writing T.O.?
For the first time, Sergeant Brewer had a target for his investigation. And that meant he needed to interview everyone who knew Egley in 1970, starting with the woman he was living with on the night of the murder, a girlfriend who he later married and then divorced.
When you talked to Tom Egley's ex, what did she admit to know?
She told me on the phone, I don't have anything to tell you. I says, well, maybe my drive out there will jar your memory a little bit.
Brewer sensed the woman was frightened, but he believed that he could get her to talk if they met face to face. And he was right.
When I got to the question, what do you remember about that night? She says, well, first thing I remember is that he came home about 3 or 4 in the morning.
The woman said Egley then did something very strange. He took a bath in the middle of the night, carefully packing the clothes he had been wearing in a laundry bag. Sergeant Brewer was stunned.
I says, I thought you didn't have anything to tell me. She says, I didn't think that's important.
The next morning, Egley left the house before she woke up and got rid of the clothing he had been wearing.
She asked where those clothes were. He says, oh, they had holes in them, so I threw them away.
Brewer believed his ex-wife's story proved that Egley had lied to police in 1970. The clothing he provided investigators for testing was not what he had worn on the night of the murder. Armed with the new details from his ex-wife, Brewer believed it was time to confront Tom Egley and lock down his story of what he did on the night of Loretta Jones' murder.
What was your mindset as you got ready to sit down with Egley for the first time?
I'm pretty much going to try to just talk to him, gain his trust a little bit, and see if I can get him to trip over things that only someone that would have done this would have known.
How did the conversation unfold?
Not very good. He just, no, it wasn't me.
Still, Brewer presented his case to prosecutors, including the new witness testimony and his theory of the crime. Their response was not what he wanted to hear.
We were looking at what, if any, evidence could be admitted at trial, what was usable, what was not. We were very concerned about that.
The DA's office decided that there still wasn't enough evidence to charge Tom Egley.
How did you react? You had to have been disappointed.
I was disappointed because by then a few years had passed. There's been a lot of work put into this.
But as Sergeant Brewer had demonstrated in the past, he wasn't about to give up. He discussed Loretta's case at a symposium for cold case investigators from across the country, hoping for ideas on how to advance the investigation. The best suggestion he got was to exhume Loretta's body.
We had a lab technician there, and she had said that although it's a very small chance, it's possible, depending on what condition the body may still be in, you could still get DNA off of her.
Sergeant Brewer took the radical idea to Heidi Jones.
How did you feel about the possibility that your mom's body would be
Do
exhumed?
it. Give me the shovel. I'll help dig. Because if that's what it's going to take, I will do it. I will do whatever I had to do.
In June of 2016, police unearthed Loretta's body.
Once you exhumed Loretta's body and attempted to extract DNA, were you successful?
Not at all.
But that didn't dissuade you.
No, because our first goal was to get DNA. If that fails, we'll go to Plan B.
What was Plan B?
Plan B was the bluff.
All along, Sergeant Brewer and his good friend Detective Wally Hendricks knew it was unlikely that the exhumation would reveal any new evidence. But they were counting on the highly publicized undertaking unnerving Tom Egley, perhaps even convincing him that they had discovered DNA evidence.
We did the exhumation, and we made sure it was made public. We ensured that the news of that would reach where he lived in Rocky Ford, Colorado. That did happen, and we were hoping that he would somehow respond to that.
And Egley did respond. One of Egley's neighbors in Colorado contacted police to inform them that Egley had asked her for help if he had to go away to prison for a while.
Tom came to her house and says, "Hey, can you watch my dogs? The cops are going to come for me really soon." So we knew we already had him worried.
Sergeant Brewer and his partner raced to Colorado with a plan to trap Egley. They provided his neighbor with a script of questions to ask him, and she agreed to tape record his answers using her cell phone. Within 3 days, the plan paid off.
She says, "I got him." I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "He confessed." And she played it for us. And his words were, "I don't remember stabbing her, but I did cut her throat." I couldn't believe it. I says, "Rewind that, I gotta hear it again." I still get chills when I hear it.
Next, the neighbor arranged a meeting between Egley and the detectives. Investigators hope he would repeat his chilling confession.
You went to Loretta's house, and then what happened? How did you gain access?
All I had to do was knock. I'd had a few drinks before then. I don't remember stabbing her or anything like that. I do remember cutting her throat. And then I left.
Although Egley never admitted to the sexual assault on Loretta nor the attempted abduction of Lori Kulo, Sergeant Brewer believed he had enough evidence to charge him with murder. This time, prosecutors agreed, and they issued a warrant for Egley's arrest.
Federal marshals executed the arrest and brought him back to Utah.
The confession also allowed Sergeant Brewer to make the most satisfying phone call of his career.
What did it feel like to pick up the phone and call Heidi and tell her that you had a confession from Egley?
Words can't describe what it was like. It says, "We got your guy. Your mom can rest now." I choked up, I gotta admit. A big, tough cop. But I was overwhelmed. I guess it really sunk in more when I told Heidi, more than it did when I heard it for myself.
For Heidi Jones, it was a moment she had been waiting for since finding her mother's lifeless body 46 years before.
He's like, "He confessed." I said, "What?" He said, "He confessed. Egley confessed." Oh my God, are you serious? That was what I was saying over and over.
Tom Egley ultimately pled guilty to the second-degree murder of Loretta Jones. At the hearing, Heidi finally had the chance to confront the man who had caused her a lifetime of pain.
In my impact statement, I said how it was not having my mom there for my first boyfriend, my first kiss, getting my driver's license. You know, my mom wasn't there for anything. And I wanted to know how that made him feel. And he wouldn't even look at me. You left a 4-year-old little girl in the next room to find her mother's body. How does that make you feel?
Egley was given a sentence of 10 years to life, the maximum penalty allowed under Utah's 1970s sentencing guidelines. Despite what some see as a lenient penalty, prosecutors believe Egley will spend his final days behind bars.
I don't expect Mr. Egley to get out of prison. I suspect he'll probably die there.
For Sergeant Brewer, the conviction brought an end to the most challenging journey of his long career in law enforcement, one few would ever have embarked upon.
I've had people flat out tell me, just drop it. And it's not my personality to be the I told you so guy, but I could lay in bed at night knowing I was right all along. It was a good feeling.
Heidi Jones will forever be grateful to Sergeant Brewer for his relentless pursuit of justice.
Is Sergeant Brewer your hero?
Absolutely. I've said some heroes wear capes, mine wears Kevlar. Yeah, he's my hero.
Although Egley's conviction brought a close to the most painful chapter of Heidi's life, no one in her family will ever forget what Egley stole from them.
He didn't only take Loretta's life, he took my life as a sister. He robbed her of being a mother and to be able to raise her child. And he robbed a lot of people's lives.
What do you want our audience to learn from what your family's been through?
My mom mattered. My mom's life mattered. She mattered to me the most. For me, it's all been about never give up. Never give up. As long as there's hope, there's a chance. I learned to believe in the impossible.
When Sergeant Brewer agreed to take on her mother's case, Heidi Jones made him a promise. If he ever brought her mother's killer to justice, she would get a tattoo of his favorite sports team, the Oakland Raiders. And as you can see, Heidi kept her word. I'm Paula Zahn. Please join us next time when we're back on the case.
What did the patrol officer see when he walked inside the apartment?
He saw an apartment in disarray. He saw blood on the walls. And he saw a body on the bed.
Somebody had struck her head repeatedly against the wall, and there was some deep laceration marks on her neck.
It was consistent with asphyxiation due to strangulation.
When you see that kind of disregard for a human being, that stays with you for a long time.
She said, "Don't forget about my mom." You want to give somebody the justice that they deserve.
I was like, I know he's out there, but we need to go find him.
Witnesses had heard an argument between Betty and her boyfriend.
Which, of course, pointed a finger right at him.
He was literally never seen or heard from again.
How much did it torment you that her killer hadn't been caught?
To think that he might be doing the same thing to somebody else, it was devastating. But I knew we'd find him.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn. Tonight, we're on the case in Oakland, California. The bustling city became the setting for a disturbing mystery when Betty Elias was found savagely murdered inside her own home. The puzzling clues at the crime scene appeared to be designed to misdirect the investigation. But police and Betty's devoted daughter refused to give up without justice. October 28th, 1979. It was a cool Sunday morning in downtown Oakland when a neighbor noticed the front door to Betty Elias's apartment was ajar. As he walked over to close the door, he made a shocking discovery. This case started with a frantic call to the police department. What did the caller report?
Well, the caller reported that there was a body that appeared to be lifeless within the room. He saw blood on the walls, he saw a curtain torn down, and an Oakland police officer responded immediately and went up to the room.
What did the patrol officer see when he walked inside the apartment?
An apartment in disarray. So he knew immediately that this was a homicide scene, and he made sure not to let anybody else in at that point.
Crime scene investigator Kevin Traylor was among the next wave of police to descend on the apartment. What was the call that came over the radio?
A possible dead body that was found. They had already called for an ambulance to respond to the scene.
By the time CSI Traylor arrived at the San Pablo Avenue residence of Betty Elias, police had already cordoned off the area for a homicide investigation.
Back at that time, this was an economically challenged area, mixed-use properties, and the victim had lived in a resident transient hotel that was located in the same block.
The rugged but close-knit neighborhood had been home to Betty Jean Elias. The hardworking waitress lived alone in a small studio apartment that was now a crime scene. What did you see when you walked into the apartment?
When you open the door into the room, you're literally looking at the entire crime scene. In the center of the room against the far wall is a bed, and then all types of debris scattered about the room. And the initial impression is that there had been some type of struggle here because it was really torn up.
And beneath the bloodstained items piled on the bed was the victim, partially covered by a curtain that appeared to have been torn off her window. He was finally able to lift the curtain from Betty's body. What did you see as the curtain was removed from the victim?
The victim was partially disrobed. Her pants had been pulled down around her ankles. Her breasts were exposed. It looked like the bra that she had on had been cut or ripped in the middle. And she had blood across her face. And there were some deep laceration marks on her neck.
The rookie crime scene investigator couldn't be certain about the cause of Betty's death, but it was clear she had suffered a savage beating. Just how brutal was this murder?
It's pretty severe. There was a lot of strikes, and it looked like somebody had struck her head repeatedly against the wall because of the blood spatters.
Was it obvious to you she had been sexually assaulted?
My impression, based on the way the body was positioned and the way the clothes had been apparently cut, that it was in fact a sexual assault.
Detectives also saw evidence that Betty had fought hard to save her life. Did Betty have any defensive wounds on her body?
Yes, her bloodied hands, knuckles, fingernails.
After the coroner removed Betty's body to perform an autopsy, investigator Traylor discovered a critical clue.
I found a curtain rod, and indications were that this was a portion of the curtain rod that had been pulled from the wall. And as I got to look at that more closely, I realized that there was a bloody fingerprint on the curtain rod.
The fingerprint appeared to be a promising lead.
How critical of a clue did you think that would be?
At the time, I was hoping that they could identify someone based upon that. There was quite a bit of detail.
But first, police would need a suspect to match it with. Investigator Traylor also found clues that helped him develop a theory of how the attack had unfolded. He noted that the killer had not forced his way into her apartment.
There was no indication of any kind of damage to the door lock or the door frame.
And robbery did not appear to be a motive for the attack.
Could investigators ever determine whether anything was stolen from Betty's apartment?
She had jewelry on her fingers. She had a necklace on. Nothing appeared to have been stolen.
Everything at the crime scene pointed to two possibilities. Betty had been viciously attacked by a man she had willingly let in, or the killer had a key. And that meant police would have to take a hard look at those closest to Betty Elias. Oakland police investigating the murder of Betty Elias had reached several troubling conclusions. Based on the disturbing evidence at the crime scene, it appeared the 45-year-old had been viciously beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death in her small apartment. Detectives theorized the killer was someone Betty knew and trusted. Now, investigators had to notify Betty's loved ones about the tragedy. The news was especially devastating for Betty's daughter, Joanne. She had only recently learned that Betty was actually her birth mother.
How old were you when you were told that the woman who you thought was your mother wasn't, in fact, your biological mother?
I was told when I was 17.
The secret her stepmother revealed that day was both painful and confusing. It turned out that Joanne had known Betty her whole life.
Who did you know her as?
A friend of the family.
After the discovery, Joanne confronted Betty, who did her best to explain why she had allowed Joanne's father and stepmother to raise her. In part, it was a sign of the times in the early 60s.
When you talked with your mom about the circumstances of your early family life, did you feel bitter about what had happened, or did you understand?
I understood. I completely understood. A single mom, it was this big struggle, and it was not something that you really heard of. And my dad was very agreeable.
But the price was steep. Betty was allowed to see Joanne, but she could never reveal that she was actually her mother.
What did you find out from your mom?
She struggled all her life, worked laborious jobs, but she supported herself. Her attitude in life is what you make it, and she made it the best that she could do on her own.
How would you describe your mom's personality?
I never saw her disappointed or angry. She was always happy, always laughing, always had a smile.
And Betty's biggest smile came when Joanne told her she was a grandmother.
Once you had a child of your own, how important was it for you to become even closer with your mom?
It was really important because I wanted her to get to know my daughter, and I wanted my daughter to get to know her.
But just a few months after that joyful introduction, Joanne got the worst phone call of her life.
What do you remember your aunt saying to you?
That they found my mom murdered in her home. And all I could remember was screaming. And I just completely went into hysterics because I couldn't believe this actually happened.
Her murder came at a time when you had really gotten close to her.
Yes, it was devastating. It was just really hard to deal with, to know that she has been taken away from me by somebody else's hands.
Oakland police promised Joanne they would work hard to bring her mother's killer to justice. And they hoped the coroner's report might provide them an important lead.
What did the pathologist ultimately determine killed Betty?
Ultimately, it was asphyxiation due to strangulation. He saw 2 fractures to the hyoid bone and a fracture to the thyroid bone, and there were other injuries consistent with manual strangulation.
Could the coroner determine the time of her death?
Not really. He said it was within the previous 2 to 3 days.
The coroner was able to find biological evidence that supported the theory that Betty had been killed during a sexually motivated attack.
Obviously, in 1979, they weren't recovering that evidence because they thought they could learn something about the DNA from it. That was almost 20 years off.
What could they do with that evidence?
You know, there's not very much they could do.
It seemed clear that whoever had sexually assaulted Betty had also killed her. The autopsy report revealed that the bloody fingerprint police found on the curtain rod did not belong to Betty, but it had been left in her blood.
Clearly, it was someone that was in the room. Clearly, it was someone that had been in physical contact with blood.
Police were certain that someone had to have been Betty's killer, but preserving the fingerprint for comparison with a potential suspect wouldn't be easy.
What were its limitations?
Well, number one, you can't put fingerprint powder onto a fingerprint like that because you destroy the blood. So one of the things that I've learned was a one-to-one photography of the item, a macro photograph of the item. Once developed, the 35mm film itself becomes an accurate representation to the size and shape of the fingerprint.
At the time, the fingerprint was the only physical evidence that clearly placed the killer in the room with Betty during the murder.
That, I figured, was going to be the end-all, say-all on this, because there was, in my mind, a lot of rich definition in there.
And the first step in finding a suspect to compare the print to was establishing a timeline of Betty's last known movements. Officers canvassing her apartment building helped detectives narrow that window. Neighbors had heard Betty fighting with a man late on Friday or early Saturday morning.
Witnesses who were discovered in the apartment the Friday night before had heard an argument between Betty and another man. One of those 2 residents knew her boyfriend, recognized the voice as her boyfriend's voice, and from the context of the conversation, they were arguing about him returning a key to her.
Could it be the same key Betty's killer had used to enter her apartment?
Investigators came to learn that Betty had a tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend. Was he the obvious suspect in her killing?
He was absolutely the prime suspect, and rightly so.
The investigation into the brutal murder of 45-year-old Betty Jean Elias had led investigators to a clear target: Betty's on-again, off-again boyfriend. A neighbor told police that he knew Martins Rosales, and that Friday night wasn't the first time he had heard the couple fighting.
He had heard an argument between Betty and another man. Her boyfriend was known to stay with her a lot.
As investigators took a closer look at Betty's boyfriend, they discovered more evidence of the couple's troubled relationship. What made investigators immediately suspect Betty's boyfriend?
There was clearly some type of domestic issue between the two of them that resulted in police intervention. And there was information that I found that included bail documents and restraining order information. From a violent scene like that, 2 + 2 can often equal 4.
Betty's daughter, Joanne, also pointed investigators towards her boyfriend. What did your mom tell you about her relationship with her boyfriend?
I guess this particular one was jealous and argumentative and could be violent with her at times.
Those closest to Betty said she was tired of the volatile relationship and had ended it for good just days before.
She had told somebody that Friday night she was breaking up with her boyfriend because they had been having these fights.
Investigators were intrigued by the timing of the breakup, so close to the night of the murder. And Betty's friend raised more concerns when she mentioned that Rosales had been seen in the same nearby bar as Betty just hours before the loud argument in her apartment.
She was having drinks at the Club San Pablo. You can see the club from her window. Martin, the boyfriend, actually showed up. She offered to buy him a beer. He refused it.
Witnesses said Rosales had left the bar alone more than an hour before Betty. What did investigators learn about Betty's last known movements?
Her whereabouts is kind of unaccounted for until the witness heard the argument in the hallway. That's the last anybody heard of Betty.
Toxicology reports gave police more insight into how the attack may have unfolded.
Betty Elias had been drinking, and medical reports after her autopsy showed that she would have been under the influence. The hallway to her apartment door would have been very dark. The theory was that he had somehow snuck up behind her.
The argument Betty's neighbor overheard about a key raised another chilling possibility. Could the fight have begun with Betty angrily confronting Rosales for using a key to enter her apartment without her permission? Police decided it was time to talk with their prime suspect face to face. What happened when investigators tried to find him?
They couldn't. He was apparently gone, which, of course, pointed a finger right at him.
Friends said Martin Rosales had fled to Mexico.
You know, the old saying is the guilty flee where no man pursueth, and so for that reason, it cast even greater suspicion on him.
Investigators were also puzzled when Rosales had skipped town. It appeared he had left before police found Betty's body.
By Sunday, the 29th, he was gone, and he was literally never seen or heard from again.
Rosales had even failed to collect his final paycheck.
Who's going to leave money on the table? Well, somebody who's, guilty of a crime.
Investigators immediately got a warrant to search Rosales' abandoned apartment.
We were looking for indicia that showed his connection to that apartment where she was murdered.
What did you find?
There was nothing that would suggest blood transfer or contamination, nothing specific to that crime scene.
Despite the setbacks, investigators refused to give up. It turned out that Rosales had a police record under an alias. That meant his fingerprints were on file. Investigators compared them to the bloody print found on the curtain rod at the crime scene. The results were stunning.
It did not match in any regard.
Were you surprised there wasn't a match?
I was fully unprepared for it to come back as negative. It was quite a shock.
Where did that leave the investigation?
It left it in kind of the twilight zone. What had been assumed a likely suspect now became a whodunit.
Investigators had no choice but to move on from Martine Rosales and start back at square one. But they remained confident the fingerprint on the curtain rod would be the key to finding Betty's killer. Was there anyone else police obtained fingerprints from?
Yes, they did a lot of sensible things, which is look at ex-boyfriends and ex-husbands. You know, people who would have had understandable motives to kill somebody.
Did that lead them anywhere?
Didn't. Nope, those were all dead ends.
The case might have gone cold and stayed that way forever. But Betty's daughter Joanne was not going to let that happen. Her quest for justice was just beginning.
What did you think the chances were that they would ever find out who killed your mom?
I had to stay positive. I had to be persistent. He's out there. We need to go get him. I knew we'd find him.
The investigation into the brutal murder of 45-year-old Betty Elias had stalled. Detectives had already cleared her boyfriend, Martine Rosales, and over time, they had also eliminated every other potential suspect on their radar. Still, police remained convinced that one clue would ultimately solve the case. The fingerprint in Betty's blood investigators had lifted off the curtain rod at the crime scene.
How critical of a clue was that fingerprint?
If you're talking about proving murder, the one piece of evidence that could not be explained in any way consistent with innocence was the bloody fingerprint on that curtain rod. The person whose fingerprint was in blood, that's your killer right there.
Detectives began to consider the possibility that Betty may have been attacked by a stranger. The crime scene photographs were re-examined to see if there were any clues to support their new theory.
There were some things that were spilled on the bed next to her body. That was critical because it told us it wasn't somebody who knew her. They wouldn't go through her purse. It was likely a stranger.
A stranger-on-stranger murder with no witnesses is the most difficult type of crime for police to solve.
There's nowhere to go with it. There's no direct evidence to correlate to a specific individual, so there's no avenues to explore.
Police might have been ready to put the Betty Elias case file on the shelf, but her daughter Joanne Paletta never stopped asking questions or pushing the Oakland Police Department.
How did you try to spark interest in the case? What did you do?
I kept bothering the detectives in the homicide division. I kept going up there. I kept calling, asking, I want the case reopened. I want it investigated.
She's made phone calls. She said, don't forget about my case. Don't forget about my mom. This is a real crime. And to their credit, Oakland police cared about it.
But as the years turned into decades, detectives slowly became more and more reluctant to offer Joanne reasons to hope. It seemed like the case was at a permanent dead end.
When you've got a case from 1979, where all leads were initially followed up on, you'd need some huge break. So I think you'd look at it in those years and say, what are we supposed to do?
They were telling me that more than likely the guy who did this is either deceased or you're not going to find him. And I was disappointed because I was like, I know he's out there, but we need to go find him.
How much did it torment you that her killer hadn't been caught?
To think that he might be doing the same thing to somebody else, to another family, it was devastating.
But in 2008, the Oakland Police Department launched a cold case initiative, and Joanne's tireless work paid off. How did you get the attention of the cold case unit?
I bothered the heck out of them. I called them all the time. I made trips to Oakland.
And Joanne even had a game plan for how to close the case. What did you think the key would be to solving her murder?
DNA, because it doesn't lie.
Was there a sense that the case was solvable after almost 40 years?
Yes. A detective looked at the coroner's report and he saw immediately that there was evidence that may be testable for DNA. Prior to DNA being testable, anybody in the cold case unit would have looked at this case and said it was hopeless.
But if there was biological evidence collected, it was now more than 3 decades old, and many wondered if it would even be viable for DNA testing. The cold case unit reviewed the file and decided to test some of the evidence.
Right.
What happened?
They put in a request to the Oakland Police Department Crime Lab to test that evidence.
Laura Silva, a criminalist for the Oakland Police Department, knew the challenges they were facing with evidence collected in 1979.
This is an old case, so we don't know what we're going to find. We ended up looking at a number of evidence items, lots of clothing, as well as slides that were prepared at the coroner's office just from swabs that they had taken from the victim.
It soon became clear the coroner's slide contained biological evidence.
It was super exciting. We knew we had sperm, we knew we were going to get male DNA, we just didn't know how good of quality it was going to be.
The outcome would decide whether the man who took the life of Betty Elias got away with murder or whether he would finally face justice. The murder of Betty Elias had been unsolved for more than 35 years when Laura Silva peered into her microscope. The forensic scientists hoped she would find enough DNA on the decades-old autopsy slide to generate a profile of Betty's killer. The results were surprising.
We ended up with a nice male donor DNA profile.
And the good news was only just beginning. The DNA was a match to an offender profile in the CODIS database. For the first time in more than 3 decades, investigators had a new suspect in the murder of Betty Elias. His name was Dennis Eagle. Had Dennis Eagle ever been looked at as a possible suspect over the years in her murder?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, this was a young man at the time of the murder, had just turned 18. He'd grown up on an Indian reservation in Fort Peck, Montana.
Police couldn't find anything in Dennis Eagle's background that connected him to Betty Elias. But his criminal history led them to believe they were on the right track. Dennis Eagle was behind bars for an unrelated violent attack.
They learned that he was in federal prison in Virginia for a sexual assault that he'd committed.
Oakland detectives traveled to Virginia to interview Dennis Eagle. With an audio tape rolling, they asked him some basic questions. Did he cooperate?
He was very cooperative. He had no idea what they were talking about and acted as if he had nothing to hide and nothing to explain.
Detectives then showed Eagle a picture of Betty Elias.
Have you ever seen this woman before?
No.
Police asked Eagle to sign an affidavit confirming he had never seen Betty.
Can you please just sign that or initial it for me?
Right on her? I've never seen her before.
If you don't mind, please.
Dennis Eagle claimed he had never met Betty and had never even been to Oakland.
When were we in California?
I used to live up there with my cousin in San Jose.
Do you remember when?
No, I think I was about 12, 13 maybe.
You never came back? Not as a pass-through?
No.
Okay, have you ever been to Oakland before?
No.
Kind of a crazy picture, but you ever seen that place before? It's gonna be like a hotel area in Oakland.
No.
No?
What am I doing all this stuff for?
But for us to go ahead and say, you've never been to Oakland, you've never seen any of this before.
Can I see everything you got? And maybe I could just ask
Sure.
you one time that I've never seen it.
Investigators hope to lock him into that lie.
So Dennis Jr. got brought up in this, and this lady right here, Betty Elias, was a murder victim back in '79. So we had to come out here and talk to you. They say, hey, Dennis, is there any reason why we would find your DNA on her person?
No.
Eagle's denials were almost as strong as a confession.
How powerful were those lies in building a case against him?
When you have a DNA result that tells you that this profile we've recovered belongs to Dennis Eagle, and it's such a rare profile that only 1 in 16 trillion people would share that profile, that's proving a fact that's going to be hard to argue with. And so when Dennis Eagle decides to lie, that shows a consciousness of guilt.
Before they left Virginia, detectives rolled a fresh set of Dennis Eagle's fingerprints. Latent fingerprint examiner Kimberly Lankford compared them to the bloody print found on the curtain rod.
Detective Voss brought in a card for me to compare. I had had the case for months, and there were many, many, many people that they had compared. I wasn't very hopeful because we make more exclusions than we do identifications.
And the likelihood of an exclusion only rises when the evidence is more than 3 decades old.
Everybody's heard from TV about points of identification. That's just one of the things that we look at. I looked at ridge flow, I look at pattern type, I look at spatial relationship between those points.
And the time-consuming analysis confirmed what those working on the case had been hoping.
I did the comparison, and I determined they were the same source.
Investigators were even able to conclusively say that the print had come from the middle finger on Eagle's left hand. No one was more surprised than Kevin Traylor, the man who had carefully photographed that bloody print at the crime scene.
What was your reaction when some 40 years after you investigated this case, you found out there was a new suspect?
I was genuinely shocked. And that's when they explained that they had identified a fingerprint that was in the blood. They were able to physically put him at this scene. That's incredible.
Alameda County Deputy District Attorney Mark Melton agreed.
The fingerprint really proved the murder. In my opinion, no reasonable person could believe that that fingerprint was there for any other reason than that the owner of the fingerprint killed Betty Jean Elias.
Dennis Eagle was charged with the murder of Betty Elias. When his trial began in April of 2019, investigators explained a theory of how the terrifying crime unfolded. They believe Eagle arrived in Oakland just minutes before committing the crime.
The Greyhound bus station to my right is where we believe Dennis Eagle arrived to Oakland. And at that time, he was just a block and a half away from where Betty's apartment was. We believe that somewhere in that block and a half is where they first made contact with one another.
It was close to midnight when Betty left the bar across the street from her apartment.
What do you think happened the night that Betty was murdered?
Well, my theory is that she was probably exhibiting some of the symptoms you'd likely see from somebody who had a little bit too much to drink. I think he saw her on the street and targeted her as an opportunity.
Investigators believe Eagle followed Betty and either pushed his way into her apartment as she entered or perhaps offered to help her with her key. At 18 years old, Dennis Eagle may have appeared harmless, but once he was inside, he began his relentless assault.
She definitely fought. She had defensive wounds that the doctor talked about. She definitely got thrown around the room in different locations.
Many aspects of the trial were emotionally challenging for Betty's daughter, Joanne. But the most difficult part for her was Dennis Eagle's apathy and lack of remorse.
They had warned me, you're going to see the pictures, you're going to see her body. It will be there. It's like, okay, I can handle this. I'm strong. And I sat through the whole thing looking at him to see what his response would be. He never even looked up. He always had his head down.
Eagle's defense tried to argue the evidence was old and had been contaminated over time.
The defense attorney was basically reviewing all my evidence, and I had to keep telling him, that's how sophisticated we could be. Yet 40 years later, that was still sufficient to maintain that evidence and be able to use the evidence in this trial.
The jury agreed and found Dennis Eagle guilty of murder. Describe to me what you were thinking and what you were feeling as the guilty verdict was read.
I take professional satisfaction in a verdict, but Joanne befriended me, so you also feel this weight of expectation. You want to give somebody the justice that they deserved. So when the verdict was announced, I just felt relief for Joanne because I just knew how much it meant to her.
Dennis Eagle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Betty's daughter, Joanne, the verdict brought an end to a 38-year crusade. You were prepared for the worst, but then you heard the word guilty.
Guilty. And I just broke down. The whole time I'm watching him, and he had nothing to say. There was no remorse. I think he actually thought he was going to be able to walk away. And for the rest of his life, he's going to pay the price. And I made sure of that. That was my goal. That was my promise, that I would see this to the end. We would find him, the person that killed her. We'll bring him to justice and put him away. And it happened.
For Joanne, it was a final gift to the mother she knew for just a few short years, but loved so dearly.
You have said that your mother had...
The Betty Jean Elias case made history as the oldest case ever tried in Alameda County. Dennis Eagle will begin his life sentence in California after he finishes serving the time he has left in federal prison. I'm Paula Zahn. Please join us next time when we're back on The Case.
Catch 911. We ran out some roofs. I need help. My wife, I don't think she's breathing.
What did the first responders see?
They saw Jamie Baldwin. He said, please save my wife. But he told Jamie that she's gone. She was dead.
I beat everybody to the hospital. I was like, where's Mom? And he just said, you know, she didn't make it.
It was a big loss. It was unreal.
He says, I hit my head really hard. I just woke up and she was gone.
We could not figure out why there was so much blood inside the vehicle itself.
I didn't put a manner of death down. I wanted to do more investigation.
Nothing made sense.
Did it ever occur to the sheriff's department that there was something more involved here?
Yes. We were all looking at each other like, what is this guy possibly capable of?
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Chester, South Carolina, about 50 miles south of the state capital in Columbia. The close-knit suburban community is the type where neighbors raise families together and stick together through thick and thin. But when a mysterious accident took the life of Judy Baldwin, it raised concerns about what was happening behind the scenes in their hometown. December 14th, 2016. It was just before midnight when the Chester County Sheriff's Office got a desperate call.
Chester 911.
The man on the line breathlessly identified himself as Jamie Baldwin, and he said he had just had a serious accident.
I'm on this folk road between I-77 and the golf course. We ran off the roof.
Jamie told the dispatcher his wife was severely injured.
I need help. My wife, I don't think she's breathing.
Hey, is she trapped in the vehicle?
No, ma'am, it threw her out.
Jamie had desperately attempted to revive his wife.
Please help me. Oh, God.
Sir, do you want to try CPR?
I've already tried.
You've already tried?
Oh, God.
First responders raced to the remote location on the side of a dark country road. What did the first responders see as they arrived at the scene?
They saw Jamie Baldwin along the guardrail of this small bridge overpass. He said, please save my wife. And the very first responder checked on Judy, and he told Jamie that she's gone. She was dead.
On the surface, it appeared that Judy had been killed after being flung from the couple's Jeep, which had gone off the road and down a hill.
Where was Judy's body in relation to the Jeep?
Her body was around the front of the Jeep. She was laying perfectly parallel in the creek.
When police questioned him, Jamie explained how the accident happened.
Can you describe the terrain for me?
The road itself is very hilly, a lot of curves on this road. It was very dark that night.
It was raining that night, it was wet, it was foggy.
Jamie claimed that just as he came out of a tight turn, he suddenly saw the headlights of an oncoming truck on his side of the road.
He said, before I knew it, there was a truck in my lane. I swerved off the right side of the road to avoid hitting them. The Jeep just took us around over the embankment, and the next thing I know, we ended up in the creek.
How fast did Jamie say the Jeep was traveling?
He said he was going about 55 to 60 miles per hour. He said it happened so quickly, he never put on the brakes. He just basically at that point was trying to avoid the head-on impact.
Jamie said he had lost consciousness after the violent car wreck.
At what point did he say he realized that she had been ejected from the Jeep?
He says, I hit my head really hard from the impact. I don't know what happened. I just woke up and she was gone.
Jamie told investigators that as soon as he realized Judy wasn't in the Jeep, he scrambled to his feet and tried to find her.
He had climbed out of her side of the vehicle to check on her. He went up and down the embankment 2 or 3 times, trying to locate his wife. Then when he walked around to the front of the Jeep, he said that he found her crumpled up and kind of leaning up against the front bumper.
Then Jamie, a former Chester County 911 dispatcher and police officer, tried to save Judy.
Was he trained? in CPR?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, he definitely, from years of training, knew how to do it, when to do it, and the importance of it.
While officers took their emotional former colleague to the hospital for evaluation, Highway Patrolman Kirk Winburn focused his attention on Judy's lifeless body.
What injuries were apparent to you?
She had a lot of bruising across her face, both eyes, nose, had a large laceration across her forehead.
We learned that she had quite substantial head injuries. She had a horrible laceration over her right eye. Underneath her right ear, there was an impact point where you could see that she had been bleeding.
Investigators were puzzled. Judy's injuries and blood smears in the car didn't line up with the evidence at the accident scene.
We could not figure out, why there was so much blood inside the vehicle itself.
And a second interview with Jamie revealed a new detail. He said the couple was on their way to the hospital at the time of the crash.
So everybody's on the scene thinking, oh, this woman was ejected from this vehicle. That's how she got these injuries. And then he says at the hospital that she actually fell at the house.
The story that Judy had fallen off a ladder in her home helped explain the blood in the car, but it also raised new questions. A deadly car accident now had at least two dark mysteries for police to untangle. A flash of headlights from an oncoming truck had forced Jamie Baldwin off a narrow strip of country road. His 53-year-old wife, Judy, had been killed in the tragic accident. Now, while police were still processing the puzzling scene, Judy's loved ones were just getting the devastating news.
I was at work that night, and I got a call from my wife saying Mom been in an accident. I was like, where's she at? And I beat everybody to the hospital.
But when Josh arrived, there was no record of his mother having been admitted.
They was like, no, we don't have a Judy or Baldwin. I was like, is there a Jamie Baldwin here? It was like, yeah. When I walked into the room, I was like, where's Mom? And he just said, she didn't make it. I wish it was me.
Josh then had to break the tragic news to the rest of his family.
When we got to the hospital, my brother was coming out and saying, she didn't make it. That was a bad time.
That deep sense of grief spread throughout the night as Judy's family discovered that the kind-hearted mother and grandmother was gone.
Mom was laid back, loving, caring. You could tell her anything. She loved everybody. She tried to do everything for everybody. She was the best mom you could ever ask for.
She was a little tiny thing, 4'11", 100 pounds soaking wet. She was always there for me and my brother.
Her number one passion was her family. That was her pride and joy. She was the type of woman that when you walked into a room, even if you were in a bad mood, you would see her and it would just put you in a good mood.
Judy's death was the second terrible tragedy the Orr family had suffered in recent years. Her husband and father of her two boys had died in a motorcycle accident.
It was a big loss. It still don't seem real to me to this day. It's hard.
They were just so in love, and they always got along.
Judy took on the responsibility of being a single parent while starting a company to support her family.
Tell me a little bit about her business.
She had a cleaning business. She loved it. She had her regular people that she did house cleaning for, and they loved her too.
But despite her success, there was a deep void in Judy's life until she met Jamie Baldwin, a former police officer and retired 911 dispatcher with the Chester County Sheriff's Office.
He cared for our mom, and I was happy for her. As long as Mom's happy, I'm happy.
My Aunt Judy was finally happy. That's all that mattered to everybody.
Did she ever talk to you about her marriage?
We talked about her marriage, how happy they were. It was great. I mean, she loved Jamie Baldwin with all her heart.
When those closest to Judy learned that she and Jamie had been on their way to the hospital at the time of the crash, they were stunned.
Did he call her sons?
No, he did not. Her son, Chris Orr, lives directly across the street from them, and he did not call any of them.
It seemed hard to believe that Judy, who was constantly in touch with all of her loved ones, hadn't called anyone either.
Every night before bedtime, you would get a text from her telling you she loved you and have a good night. She was just that type of person.
The lack of communication was odd, but it was just one of the things that stood out in the strange sequence of events that ended in Judy's death. Investigators were also puzzled. They asked Jamie, who had no serious injuries, to answer a few questions at the police station. He said the night had begun innocently enough. After work, he and Judy picked up something to eat.
We went to Chicken King, picked up supper.
You know about what time? It ain't got to be exact, brother.
7:30 something. Yeah, it was kind of late because we were late getting home that day from work.
After dinner, Judy was eager to start getting ready for Christmas, which was just about a week away. Meanwhile, Jamie made preparations for a motorcycle trip the next day.
I went and packed my clothes because I was leaving the next morning, going to Kentucky to deliver Christmas presents to kids at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Jamie said he had gone to the garage to put away some tools. But while Judy was on the ladder putting up the last touches on the family Christmas tree, something had gone terribly wrong.
When you walked in, what was the first thing you saw with her?
She was getting up, trying to get up.
Was she on all fours?
She was on hands and knees, and she kind of fell back over. And I ran over there and picked her up. I got her up. I got her in the bathroom, and I cleaned her up, and it was bleeding bad.
Judy had a large laceration on her head. Jamie said he knew right away that his wife needed medical help.
I said, Judy, you got to have some stitches. I was like, I gotta take you to the hospital.
Jamie said that although Judy was bleeding heavily, she insisted on not being taken to the closest hospital.
Chester Hospital is only 2 miles from where they live. He said that she'd always hated Chester Hospital, didn't want to go there, so he took her to Piedmont, which is 30 miles away.
We started down the road, and she was talking to me. And I asked her, I said, how you feeling? She said, my head's hurt. And she looked up at me, she said, I love you. I said, I love you too.
Minutes later, Jamie careened off the road to avoid a truck. The heartbreaking story and Judy's hard fall explain the blood on the headrest in the couple's car. But there were still some details that made less sense. Was Jamie Baldwin, their former colleague at the sheriff's office, hiding crucial information? Judy Baldwin had been found dead after her husband's Jeep went off the road on a dark night. As investigators tried to understand the puzzling evidence at the scene, Jamie Baldwin dropped a bombshell. The crash wasn't Judy's first accident of the night. Jamie explained that the couple had been on their way to the hospital after Judy fell off a ladder in their home. Deputies now had to scour the area where she fell for clues.
What did the lead detective find in the Baldwin's living room?
When he got to the house, he found the ladder kind of catty-corner to the mantle where some stockings had been hung, and he also found blood that was along the mantle and on the flooring around the Christmas tree.
The ladder was tilted over into the tree. The deputy believed that Judy might have been reaching for the mantle and lost her balance.
Based on the blood he saw, how did he think the accident happened?
He thought she fell and hit her head on the edge of the mantle.
Was there anything that he saw that created skepticism for him about Jamie's account?
No. He took very limited photos, which went along with his belief that this was a fall.
In fact, the Chester County Sheriff's Office wrapped up their investigation incredibly quickly. Some wondered if it was because the grieving husband, Jamie Baldwin, was a former colleague.
He was a police officer for years. He worked at Chester Dispatch.
Was it pretty clear to you the sheriff's department believed everything Jamie told them?
Yes, absolutely. They completely believed every single thing he was saying.
Although the sheriff's office seemed convinced by Jamie's story, several members of Judy's family had questions, including Judy's niece, Jessie McWaters.
It stopped making sense to me the moment that I heard that there was a fall at the house. This wasn't sitting with me. I mean, my Aunt Judy's hurt. Why do you not take her 2 miles away? So I called him and talked to him myself. That phone call was eerie, and I will never forget that phone call.
Jessie believed that Jamie's story seemed rehearsed and lacked emotion.
Oh my God. I don't have any emotions. I just don't think that this is real. It's like fake. I don't believe this.
It's not fake, Jessie. The only good thing I can tell you is she's in heaven.
Yeah.
Right before we went around that curve, she done told me, she said, I love you. I said, I love you too.
I just don't, this can't be real. She was my person.
Although Jamie Baldwin told everyone the same story, Judy's autopsy report raised even more doubts.
What did the coroner determine once he had a chance to examine Judy's body?
The coroner immediately had concerns. Nothing made sense.
What didn't add up to him?
It didn't add up that she had the type of laceration on her head and massive internal bleeding based on it just being a simple fall.
And he didn't believe there was any way those injuries came from being jettisoned out of the Jeep?
No, or from a fall from a stepladder.
Severe brain trauma was the official cause of Judy's death, but the pathologist's report didn't make it clear what or who was responsible for the injury.
The pathologist didn't have a final conclusion as to manner of death and whether it was a homicide or an accident.
Sheriff Alex Underwood viewed the inconclusive report as the end of the investigation. But the coroner's office wanted a second autopsy to be performed.
He said, I need to get someone who's board certified.
Was the second autopsy performed?
It was. It was performed by Dr. Janice Ross.
Dr. Ross was one of the most respected pathologists in the country. What were your findings?
I found that she had at least 2 or 3 lacerations of her right forehead, and then the whole left side of the head was bruised. There was a fracture of the skull.
Would falling off a ladder have created those extensive injuries?
No. Falling on your head on a hard surface, you can get that injury to the left side of her head, but you don't get injury to 2 sides of your head from one fall.
Was there any way she received these injuries from a car accident?
No. If she were propelled out of a vehicle, I would expect to see superficial scraping of the skin if she hit the ground, but there was nothing like that.
Dr. Ross's report made it clear the story Jamie Baldwin had told sheriff's deputies wasn't true.
What was your determination about manner of death?
I didn't put a manner of death down. I wanted to do more investigation. I wanted to hear more about the scene.
But the sheriff's office did not provide more information. The investigation into Judy's death was no longer active.
They still treated it as an accident, and no further information was gathered.
Was it as though they were completely disregarding her findings?
They were going with she fell from a ladder.
But why?
I didn't want to point fingers. It just seemed like every time that we tried to reach out from my office or through the coroner, it just seemed to stall.
Prosecutor Candace Lively asked for South Carolina's law enforcement division, known as SLED, to do a follow-up investigation.
Let's do the right thing and bring in an outside agency so that way there's no question whatsoever.
But her request of Sheriff Alex Underwood was met with silence.
It was like crickets. In order for SLED to come in, they have to be invited in by the sheriff.
Would it be accurate to say that the sheriff's department dragged its feet?
Yes, they did, and that was so frustrating to me.
But just a few weeks later, the sheriff's office was forced to reconsider everything they knew about the case.
The decision just finally got made for them.
The Chester County Sheriff's Office had concluded that the suspicious death of 53-year-old Judy Baldwin was the result of a tragic pair of accidents. But her family, friends, and even other law enforcement agencies in South Carolina weren't as certain. In fact, many believed that Jamie's account of that night was riddled with inconsistencies. Still, it appeared those suspicions would never be fully investigated until the one-time member of law enforcement landed in the crosshairs of his former colleagues once again.
We received a call saying, "You're not going to believe this, Terry King's house burned down."
Terry King was Jamie Baldwin's new girlfriend, a member of the same motorcycle club that he and Judy had belonged to, and a woman he had moved in with just weeks after his wife's death. And Terry told police that she believed Jamie was responsible for the fire at her home. She said a bitter breakup was the motive for the crime.
In her statements to law enforcement, she did relay that she wanted him to move out. She wanted him to be gone. Pretty quickly thereafter, the home did go up in flames. All of our antennas go up at that point, and he became the #1 person of interest.
And there was another critical detail. The fire had taken place in York County, and the sheriff's office in that county immediately invited SLED South Carolina's law enforcement division, to help investigate the potential crime. What were their findings about the fire?
They knew right away someone set this fire. It was not an accident. They knew they were looking at an intentional fire.
And during SLED's investigation of Jamie Baldwin, they made a shocking discovery. An unusual insurance policy.
It was an accident insurance policy that he had actually just taken out on Judy from that summer before she died.
How shocked were investigators when they ran across that insurance policy that was taken out just months before Judy was killed?
It spoke volumes. It starts to make sense.
Investigators wondered if that accident policy could have been a motive for Jamie to stage Judy's death. Did he ever collect on any of these policies?
Yes, he did.
But even after that windfall, Jamie's finances were still rocky.
He couldn't even do the burial for my mom. He didn't have the money. He didn't use all Mom's money.
And there were also rumors that his romance with Terry King had begun before Judy's death.
In our bike club, a lot of the guys and girls, we talked about it. We thought something was going on.
So at the time that all of this happened, what do you think the state of their marriage was?
Things started changing. She seen a side of Jamie that she had never seen.
In fact, Judy's friends believe that she knew Jamie was straying. Do you think she did confront him?
I think she confronted him the night she died about him and Terry.
The stories from Judy's inner circle and the suspicious fire at the home of Jamie's girlfriend left Sheriff Alex Underwood little choice but to begin another investigation into Judy's death. Was it the arson charge that forced the sheriff's department to look at Jamie differently?
Yes, you turn a blind eye to that. The perception in your small community is going to be, you're just letting this person get away with something.
Ultimately, the sheriff's office invited SLED, the South Carolina Highway Patrol, and the solicitor's office to participate in a reopened investigation. But the challenges in front of the new team were clear-cut.
Once we became involved, we actually started off conducting search warrants as if it had been freshly committed. We involved our crime scene unit, we involved our forensics lab.
Because you were called in almost 9 months after the incident, were you concerned that some of the evidence might be compromised?
We were.
Jamie Baldwin had been given almost a year to cover his tracks and destroy any evidence that might implicate him in his wife's death. Now, a team of the premier investigators in South Carolina wondered if there might be a clue he missed. The investigation into Judy Baldwin's suspicious death was heating up. South Carolina's law enforcement division, the State Highway Patrol, and the solicitor's office were now taking a hard look at a case the Chester County Sheriff's Office had originally ruled an accident. The team had already found financial and romantic motives that indicated her husband Jamie might have actually killed Judy. But almost a year after the case was closed, would there be any evidence left to prove it? How daunting of a task is it to reapproach a crime scene some 9 months after the incident?
We weren't trying to redo anything. We wanted to work it as if that had just happened.
What leapt out to you as you reviewed the case file?
How the incident happened, the timeline of how things happened. There were just so many inconsistencies that it bothered us.
The new team reviewed the evidence from what appeared to be two separate crime scenes, inside the Baldwin's home and the accident site where Judy's lifeless body was discovered. The South Carolina Highway Patrol began their investigation by carefully recreating the path Jamie's car had taken, and it quickly became clear that his story about what had happened that night couldn't be true.
Of all of the issues that you were troubled by at the scene, what haunted you the most?
There was nothing to indicate that another vehicle had ran him off the road to make him lose control. He left a set of tire marks down the shoulder of the road. It's leaving a perfect imprint. If he was going at a high rate of speed, then it would have tore the ground up.
Did it look like it hit anything?
No. It looked like it was driven down the hill to there.
And investigators found critical evidence that confirmed that theory. Inside the Jeep was a black box, similar to the one in airplanes, that recorded the Jeep's emergency movements.
What did the data recorder show?
It actually tells you whether or not there was any type of significant event, as in slamming on brakes, a big swerve where the tires come off the road. It tells you if there was any kind of an impact, whether the airbags should have been deployed.
He claimed he was going 55 miles an hour when he swerved to miss the truck. How fast was he actually going?
There was no way he was going that fast. He couldn't have been going over 15 miles per hour.
And the location where Judy's body was found, on the driver's side of the Jeep, was also at odds with the data.
Was that even possible based on what you were looking at?
No, there was no way for her to be ejected from the vehicle. The vehicle never overturned. There was nothing to make the door come open to sling her out. She would have been on the passenger side.
It's no.
But even 9 months after Judy's death, there were crucial clues that helped prove that she had not fallen. She had been attacked.
There were blood spots that were all the way up, like over 10 feet above where the 9-foot Christmas tree would have been. If someone had fallen, there should be no reason why we have blood spatter going 10 feet up.
Was that blood visible to you?
It was.
To the naked eye?
Mm-hmm. And it was swabbed.
The blood evidence in Judy's house and the clues from the crash site convinced investigators that everything Jamie Baldwin had told police was a lie. And those new details allowed Dr. Janice Ross to make her final determination on the manner of Judy's death.
When you reflected on your findings, did you come to the conclusion that Judy had been murdered?
Yes.
There was no doubt in your mind?
No doubt.
Dr. Ross's report stated that Judy Baldwin had been beaten to death. The Jeep accident was staged to cover up the brutal crime.
How do you think her injuries were caused?
There was a stocking holder found at the scene in the house. It was either metal or hard ceramic and was damaged. That weapon could have caused the injury on the right side of the forehead.
Judy's lacerations appeared to match the broken stocking holder's unique shape.
It was extremely heavy, and the ridges had these points on it that fit the complex laceration above her eye.
And testing confirmed it.
That stocking holder had Judy's DNA on it.
Dr. Ross also explained that based on her injuries, Judy was already dead or near death when her husband placed her in the front seat of the Jeep. How long do you think she survived her injuries?
With a fractured skull like that, she would be unconscious pretty much immediately. And she may have had a heartbeat, breathing for a few minutes after that.
Detectives now believe they had the complete picture of the brutal attack on Judy Baldwin. And it wasn't an accident, it was murder. They theorized that Judy had confronted her husband about his affair in the living room, and his response was deadly. He struck her with one of the stocking holders, fracturing her skull. He then staged an accident, claiming he was on his way to the hospital.
When did you have enough for an arrest?
After we got the final finding from Dr. Ross that it was a homicide, after we had a stocking holder and how consistent it was with her lacerations, and also the blood spatter evidence was huge.
Police took Jamie Baldwin into custody, hoping the overwhelming evidence would convince him to confess.
I'm going to tell you I have some issues with some of the things you told me. There's blood all over that house, all in that room. And it makes no sense to us if somebody was just falling off of a 4-step ladder, that blood is in places that it was.
I've never let it happen, Jeannie.
Let me tell you.
I love her all my life. And I don't know how she fell down because I wasn't in there.
I think something happened. I think there was some sort of an altercation.
No, ma'am. There wasn't. I promise you.
I think something happened, and sometimes things get out of control. And sometimes things happen that people don't mean for them to happen.
I'm telling you everything.
Investigators were convinced the evidence would prove that Jamie Baldwin was lying. They charged him with the murder of his wife. It was a relief for everyone who loved Judy.
When we found out he'd been arrested, it felt good. It was like a weight off our shoulders. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to.
At trial, Baldwin stuck to his story, denying any role in Judy's death. But the precision of the scientific evidence experts provided, combined with the emotional testimony of loved ones, sealed his fate.
Candace Lively and her team, they done a great job. He didn't have any reactions in court when the truth was coming out. I mean, the evidence don't lie.
And the jury agreed. On November 5th, 2019, Baldwin was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. For Judy's family, it was a verdict they had waited way too long to hear.
There was not a dry eye in the courtroom that day. When they read the verdict, and to know that this man who killed my aunt was found guilty, we were just so happy. We were relieved to know that he would be behind bars. We finally knew that justice was served. I try to remind myself every day to live like that, because that's what she would have wanted me to do.
In May of 2019, Chester County Sheriff Alex Underwood, who oversaw the original investigation into Judy Orr's murder, was suspended from his position by the governor of South Carolina. He was indicted for unrelated charges of criminal conspiracy, misconduct in office, embezzlement, and forgery. The new sheriff, Max Dorsey, has vowed to restore the standards of integrity and moral character his constituents deserve. I'm Paula Zahn. Please join us next time when we're back on the case.